Dream by Kerberos 314, Chapter 34, Paragonesis. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage Datapayo. The ground had been taken from beneath his feet, the air from his lungs, the thoughts from his head. It had all been stolen from him by this impostor. No, you're not. Swallowing nothing, throat coated in sand, he would not steal his voice too. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Oh, so you're like what? An alternate me? A stunning realization for both of them. Orange Naruto pointed a finger at him, which he wanted to cut off. Wait, how come you got promoted while I'm stuck at tuning? Everything else taken, he became angry. You dolt! Where had the rest of his words gone, left with this childish vocabulary, while grave actions crossed his mind? That's seriously the first question you ask, not who are you, or even why are you here? Well, no, scrunching his face up in a way that was familiar and offensive to him at the same time. I'm pretty sure we're in the waterfalls of truth still, so that would make you my darkness, right? You do kind of have that emo warrior vibe going that Sasuke does. Too real, much too real. Words are like a slap in the face. His face clenched in restraint, not wanting to give this thing everything else. You, how dare you? My sister picked these out for me. First, riposte, touche, strike a grievous wound on the impostor. You have a sister. The other clutching a bleeding heart. He felt some liquid try and escape past his own skin, mouth still bone dry. Yeah. Hey, there you are, peeking up through racks of clothes parted like branches, revealing a smiling face like the sun. What are you doing in the boys section? Head cocked, head cocked coquettously to the side, only mildly aware of its devastating effect. Ah, why not? Giggling surprise and amusement. No reason, I guess. Want some help? Moon reflecting sun shining brightly at the offer. Sure, I like that design, but I think you'd look better in blackhead than orange. That had happened, didn't it? That was part of who he was. It's kind of complicated. His hand clenched around the skirt of his night jacket, altering senses of touch with that heavy denim feeling of something real. But the clothes weren't real, were they? This was all just an illusion, the frown on his face across from him merely another test to pass. I see. No, he couldn't. How could this shade understand anything about him when he didn't understand himself? I'm happy for you. I'm glad you have someone that's precious to you. Disarmed, he allowed himself to shed that anger, remembering that he was more than that. Precious people, just like Haku said, right? Yeah, a smile recognized it shared at least a part of his memories, a fragment of his reality. Therefore, you understand why I have to defeat you? Huh? It genuinely appeared confused, and for a moment he felt pity for the fragment of his soul. You said it yourself. That's why I'm here, to surmount the obstacle presented by the falls of truth. I need the ability to control Kurama's power so I can reach them, so I can finally see them in person, hold her with my own hands, and repay all that she's done for me. Mato, don't you have this backwards? Wide-eyed, waving his hands in front of him, trying to erase this notion. I'm the one who went into the falls. How do you know you're not the evil one? A question which gave him pause, stopped him mid-step. No, he shook his head, confusing his ignorant doppelganger. None of this. I'm running out of time. There was no longer any time for questions, no room for second guessing, and no leniency for shadows of doubt. Oh crap! Fearfully exclaiming as he drew Radiant Thorn out of the seal on his wrist. The orange-clad version of him obviously realized what he had moments earlier, that this confrontation would only be settled one way. Considering the level of incompetence displayed by the brightly hued shinobi, it was mildly surprising that he was able to dodge the initial assault, even though Naruto admitted he was still holding back. That would have to change. Reluctance was not something he could afford in this fight. Holy shit, where did that thing come from? He gripped, withdrawing a handful of shuriken to give himself some breathing room as he jumped back and formed a dozen clones, a cluster of orange fruit amongst all that whiteness. All 13 set eyes widened as the weapon faced right through the scythe wielder, dispersing a small cluster of crimson leaves in their wake. The clones were slow to react, three of them being culled in one swipe before the other even keened to the reappearance of their adversary. One managed to display a kunai in a feeble dance, which only lasted through one block before the sheer magnitude of force behind the swings dispelled it. This minor distraction did allow more of his comrades to throw themselves at him, latching onto his legs first to make sure he couldn't suddenly blitz them again, and another sneaking around to lock his arms in place. The remaining ones, including the original, were congealing a mass of swirling blue chakra in the background. Let's see you like it. Let's see how you like it. Rasengan. Whoa! Predictably, while boasting he wasn't prepared for the assassin the clone to suddenly be replaced by Naruto, who swung his scythe at the blue gem in the original's palm. Already formed though, the original impostor was able to withdraw his spiraling attack before he lost it as well as his hand, bracing himself on his back leg and meeting the return swing from the scythe with that gnawing sphere in his grip. Damn it! His counterpart, more vocal with his frustrations in not being able to push past the Grim Reaper. I thought you were supposed to be me. How are you so fast? Simple, Naruto replied while increasing the pressure on the heel of Radiant Thorn, cognizant of the clone reforming behind him. I'm not you, you're me, a small part of which I don't need. Suddenly realizing the pressure on his look-alike, he jammed the head of his scythe into the non-existent ground and vaulted over it. Orange Naruto stumbled forward, with the Rasengan dissipating just as above him a rain of tri-pronged kunai pressed across their infinite battlefield. One clone was struck outright by one of the Horizon-tagged weapons, the others falling immediately after in a flash of lightning, which was stark and menacing against the all-white background. Momentarily stunned, the original had enough ingrained instinct to throw himself to the ground before he was harvested by the streaming light bouncing around like a pinball. Bastard, you stole my father's jutsu. Stole! Coming out of that hypersonic slipstream, Naruto propped himself up on his weapon and scoffed. The fourth was my father, and I earned every bit of this jutsu. Do you even understand why it's so important to me? No, of course you don't. You don't know about Yang, so you sure as hell don't know her. Dude, you totally lost me, confessed the other blonde, hopping back up to his feet with a little effort. Look, why can't we talk about this? I know each of us thinks we need to defeat the other, but what if that's just the meta face? Meta farce? Damn it, what's the word for it? I'm sorry, realizing he was, and sequestering that remorse for after this trial. I don't want to do this, but even if you're honest, no, especially if you're telling the truth, I can't hear it, can't afford to entertain that kind of doubt. I need to be 100% certain of my path. If he wasn't a complete fool, by now the other Naruto should have realized the pattern and known another attack was imminent. The ability to do something about it was something else, as he but stood and watched his black-clad brother flicker towards him in a staggered pattern like a zipper of death. Comprehending that he had no chance of hitting the Reaper with a kunai or outrunning the Shunshin, he played the gambit and waited until he could feel the tickle of the blade on the back of his neck like a razor blade. Forming a single clone, he substituted himself with it to go behind his opponent and reeled up for a punch to the back of the head. With the one swift move, Naruto negated the entire effort as he jerked back on the scythe, decapitating the clone and jabbing other Naruto in the stomach with the butt of the scythe. Devoid of wind and momentum though he was, Orange Naruto latched on to the shaft in his gut and proceeded to punch away with all the force he could muster. Ruby's other took the first blow of his forehead, snarling as tired as tried to backhand the brightly colored copy only to have it bend back and cartwheel off to safety. There's nowhere to run, you know, shaking his head both in disappointment and to replace the manicured bedhead which had been mused. I don't want to fight you, reasserting his position. Still, Orange Naruto settled into a low stance with his fingers crossed in a symbol that they both knew too well. Nor I you. Despite words and deep frown to the contrary, he met the gesture with his own confrontation stance, Radiant Thorn cocked high above his head. I just want to get this over with. I see I'm going to have to beat the message into you, right? Looking to enjoy this idea, a bright grin grew to match his trappings. Naruto realized that a similar one must have spread contagiously on his face. Right, but if you intend to win, you better come at me with the intention to kill. Taking a page from Kakashi Sensei, huh? Kakashi Sensei? Ohio senpai, lying as it was late, far too late. Yo, if it isn't my cute little kohai, not bothering to let one measly eye drift away from his book as he approached the teen casually. 3 hours past due. What can I do for you today? Nah, you were the fourth student, right? What was he like, saying not a word of the man's other promises, anxious for that one thing? Hmm, that's an interesting question. I'd have to say a page turned in the same book read for 15 years. Different? Different? Familiar irritation, nostalgic pout. Different than what? Different than being his son? Not sure I can imagine the man as a teacher. Naruto shook his head, wondering why these thoughts manifested now. Taiju Kagebunshi no Jutsu, a moment's distraction unveiled a veritable grove of orange and black, a truly impressive number of clones, had he not been capable of making just as many. Is that the only thing he taught you? Response was a wall of war cries, ruffling his black clothes. All right, let me show you something I taught myself. Broadly sweeping his weapon as if to vanish the objectival sight under the ruggish, becoming reality as the blade of air sliced through the ranks like they were nothing more than dust bunnies. Yet in both cases there was always more. He dealt with these just the same. One swing, two, three. Vast swaths of smoke filled the air, and a few clones managed to get within striking distance amidst the confusion. "You're not going to bring me down," matter-of-factly stated. He made good on this promise as he dispelled the vibrant clones left and right. Two charging, he swept them off their feet, burying his blade in another, launching himself off its dumbstruck expression, and splaying his legs into two more, landing on the ground in a crouch, and ducking underneath myriad punches which passed over his head, jamming the scythe upwards and snapping shut the two jaws, pirouetting on the ball of his feet, and carving a whirlpool of destruction in every direction. "Why don't you just give up?" Standing pleading over this other who was bent double in exertion, hands braced against his orange-striped trousers. "You should know. I can't." Getting a second wind, rising to a less than impressive height, which was just a hair under his. "I have to be able to use the Kyuubi's chakra. That's why I have to win." Like claps, four clones popped into existence. Two began to form a Rasengan in each palm, while the other two stood vanguard. "Everyone's counting on me. Dummy, that's my line." Wearily he sighed, already tired of this deafening task. "Only one of us should exist here, and it should be the one most capable of succeeding." Regarding the feral smirk of his doppelganger, as if this determination had already been made. "Let the best man win." Oscillating tones from the swirling spheres rang loud in this hollow arena like church bells of the mind. "I swear I will do everything in my power to protect them." Quashing defiant thoughts under unsurmountable pressure of resolution. "Arrogant bastard!" Sneer floated like a paper scroll on a torrential wind which developed out of that nothingness. Arrogant? Maybe he was willing to admit that, was willing to admit all his faults, his selfishness, his hypocrisy, his faithfulness, yes, that one most of all. These he would happily take on, sacrifice everything else, including this persona of doubt with a smile on his face, so long as it perverted the one on hers. "I will, I'm going to." They charged, slow, slow, so slow. How could this image be anything but a travesty of him? "I can't lose, not now." One orange clone turned gunmetal gray, limbs into four honed points which spun as it was flung at him with a fury. "I can lose myself, but not them." Bringing that crescent blade across his body, tending the non-space in twine as precious air was born and bent to his whim, the Fuma Shuriken clone split, then the one holding it finished with the dual Rasengan. Two more broke off and became fodder for his unstoppable blade. Last one hung back, kept coming. "I won't lose her, not again." Palms cupping the two swirling attacks collided around his razor-back horizon, the sound of one hand clapping, of a tree falling in an empty forest, catching his wind blade, watching with twin skies wide with impossibility. He stood dumbfounded as Naruto, the shade, the real one, the real him, halted his attack, stopped it, redirected it, wrangled it into submission as he lassoed the storm. "Quit being so full of yourself." Yelling this over the cacophony even as his orange jacket was being torn apart, Naruto strained against the living breeze like a clouder of cats in his arms, tearing their claws into him. With an effort that could have lifted the shroud of nothingness from around them, Naruto threw the aforementioned attack into the distance far away from either of them, where it erupted in silence. Oomph! Giving no time for him to recover from this Herculean feat, Ruby's Naruto slammed the back end of Radiant Thorn into the other's stomach, bashing him away like a baseball. I won't hold back, excusing himself with this lie to his mirror image, picking himself off the ground with even more effort than what it took to redirect the jutsu. Undoubtedly a painful sight, he frowned in great disappointment at himself. Please, can't you just give in? Just admit that I'm him. I'm Naruto. I wonder, spitting a glob of blood on that pristine blank surface, modern art he admired as he propped himself up shakily on his hands. What kind of Naruto do you think you are? So willing to just give yourself up? I've never known him to be such a loser. No, such a damn liar. I made a promise to her, and I intend to keep it. You promise her? The leniency which reversed his blade at the last moment was forgotten like a dream. You don't even know her. How dare you claim anything about her? The hell do you mean I don't know her? Wiping the muddy trail from his mouth onto the back of his hand, clenched in rage. I've known Sakura-chan since we've been in the academy. Sakura? Racking his mind for the other parts of to that name. Haruno-san? Sakura Haruno. What does she have to do with this? Hey, you better not think about skipping out on your post-mission checkup, are you? Happiness in the air, the feeling of a job well done, turning to see a smile like an early spring. Huh, but I feel fine. You did a great job healing me up back in Iwa. Knuckles rapping on his head, knocking on the door, asking to be let in. Ow! Exclaiming playfully, eyes rolled playfully. Just go get the checkup, Naruto-san. Hi, hi, turning with a heedless wave, only to be called back in the midst of walking away. Promise me, pink hair waving in the breeze, sakura petals falling like her tears, like the pieces of that rose-colored world. Promise me you'll bring him back, bring Sasuke back to us. But Sasuke did come back. He was there, next to them in that scene. The script had deviated. That was not how things played out. This memory wasn't his. This was a dream. Whose was this? A nightmare of his fractured mind, or possibly, Oi, I'm talking to you. From hands to feet, learning to walk before he could crawl, Naruto regarded the bedraggled image with wary caution. The hell's up with you? Didn't you hear a word I said? Nothing a buffoon said could have been as important than what was running through his mind. Always keeping promises. Huh? Nah. Self doubt, that rope which was both a no nuisance and a lifeline. What did you promise her? That would bring Sasuke back to us, even if I had to break all of his bones to do it? A fierce expression he could only regard as comical. But you let him go. A critical hit, worse than the one before, as the others had shot to an invisible wound on his chest. You didn't succeed in the mission. Shut up, you failed. Bold, heedless, infuriated, hypocritically by all means, but fear overall all that, unable to put his faith in something that was so dangerously weak. How can I believe you're the best version of me if you weren't strong enough? You couldn't beat Sasuke back then. What can you hope to do now? Shut up! Snapping his mouth closed, nothing more to add because words could not express the vehemently fury quite the way his face could. The other he bowed. He knew the face of shame was reflected on that alabaster surface. I wasn't strong enough, all right. Maybe I fooled around too much at the academy, didn't pay attention to the signs when they were there. Confessing to himself, Naruto realized, sorely tempted to cut him down right then and there for this self-indulgence. Hypocrite, yes. Cruel, he wasn't, was he? But, snapping up with no trace of that guilt, he knew had been there. That doesn't mean I'm going to quit. This is just the first step to getting stronger, and I'll do as much as it takes, as long as it takes. However, I won't ever cross that line. I won't become a monster like you. Me? Horror, revulsion, fury noticeably absent. I'm willing to bet if you were in that situation, you would have fought with the intention to kill, right? Just like you did here. Bastard, I bet you did kill your Sasuke. What? No, I. Have I not have what I have is not a dream because I will make it a reality. A lonely child, one without dreams. What then do you see when this ambition is gone? What remains? I'm suffering now because I had those ties. How on earth could you possibly understand how it feels to lose all that? He couldn't, wouldn't. He wouldn't lose her, even if he had to kill everyone else. You were my best friend, Sasuke. Even his best friend, who was also doing his damnedest to kill him. The two leapt at one another, knowing that only one could exist. That friendship thrown away, discarded, destroyed by the collision of two worlds. The pain of knowing it was his fault, searing like a lightning coat, the hand through his chest. I have long since closed my eyes. My only goal is in the darkness. Get out of my head. There were too many people, thoughts, everything, and then the person who had nothing. You think you're so badass, but I think you missed out. Shut up. If you didn't have Kaka sensei as a teacher, you probably never understood that those who break the rules are trash, but those who betray their friends are worse than trash. Broken rules, broken everything, every conceivable earthly law he had at one point, flaunted, all for the sake of that paragonizedness which could bring him happiness. In doing so, chipping away piece by piece from that once complete being, first a separate person, then just a person, now just separate. Uzumaki Naruto would never sacrifice his friendship for anything. Promise me. The end of it all, the two of them face to face, eyes pleading, such a dull color, so full of life, gazing back, such a life, so vibrant, so empty. Promise me you'll come back. Emptiness, a vacuum fills rapidly with faces, color, people he had touched while sleepwalking through life, smiling back at him, once feeling incomplete, bereft of that intangible peace. His soul wells up with pride, elation. I swear I will return. Wilted, rotted, plucked to the root. Humans like weeds always rise again towards the sun. Hey, you all right? Curled up on the ground like a cowering animal, head in hands, and Radiant Thorn lying uselessly on the ground, lifeless the both of them, daring to look up only to be met with that vulpine expression of curiosity, eyes which were carbon copies of his own, narrowed to a slit, and head topped with blond hair, cropped much shorter than how Ruby and than how he liked it. What the hell's wrong with you? He asked of the other him, grumbling in chagrin as he was laughed at. Aren't I the one supposed to ask that? You keep saying weird things and then you just grab your head and collapsed. You're the one concerned with someone who was just trying to kill you, one of his hands inching towards his discarded weapon, only to stop when spotted by a reapproachable look. I could still do it. I guarantee I'm in better shape right now. Between the orange jacket torn to ribbons and the flagged vest, which hardly had a scuff on it, was one measure, but determination was indistinguishable on identical faces. Sure, how about a 5 minute break before we go back to killing each other? Hand extended down to him, hesitating as he looked at his scythe languishing in eternity. Eventually he took it. You're weird, said with a smile and a shake of his head as he was pulled to his feet. Naruto looked at his other, which could be no other but himself. Yeah, well, forgiving people is kind of my thing. I thought it was saving people. That too. Suppose I need to work on the former. Right. Instinct could only carry the conversation as far in this bizarre and unnatural world. Vast swaths of time passed in that endless expanse, surely exceeding the 5 minute mark, had either been wearing watches or even caring, unnatural yet spontaneous, moving forward whether they wanted to or not, and Naruto coming to understand that this was true even in his isolated corner of his world. So, a scythe, huh? Impulsively reaching for Radiant Thorn, Naruto had to stop himself from snatching it back. You have to admit, curiously eyed the serrated blade as he held it aloft. It certainly adds to that whole evil reaper image you got going. Mm. Half hum of agreement, half growl as he stayed his hand at his mouth admittedly. Radiant Thorn, a quizzical eye turned to him. That's its name. It's her weapon. Truth was a bitter pill to swallow, but finally admitting that was part of the cure, part of moving forward. She must be special. A smile, a knowing smile. Yeah, in shame, looking towards his feet, not expecting to see the curled haft thrust into his vision. Here, he looked up to see the mirror-like blade and his shocked reflection in it. You still have to see her, right? You'll want to give it back to her. The metal was cool to the touch, a comfort, soothing something both tangible and real. Thanks. Realizing the implications, does that mean you give up? The other blonde snorted, wiping his nose on the tattered remains of his brightly colored jacket. No way. Why can't there be two of us anyway? I still don't get that. Because, looking for an answer, but finding only a mind emptier than the nothingness they were in. I'm me and Ruby. I'm me too. There's room enough for us both to be me, spreading his arms wide, illustrating the vast eternity around them. But how? I don't know. Accident, cancer, fate. Both shuddered. Does it really matter? I suppose not. Silence reminding them they were alone in nothing. What now? Why do you keep expecting me to have the answers? Throwing his hands up, illustrating his disheveled state, which really should have been a good indicator. Look, you're kinda messed up, but an okay guy, so I know you're not my darkness. I still have to find that guy and beat him up, alright? I guess you have to do the same, right? Clutching Radiant Thorn tied to his side. It seems like we both have somewhere to be. Yep, so long, other me. Wait, in this eternity, everything was happening too fast, his mouth working before his mind. Questions he wanted to ask had no time to be received, and yet he was still running out of time. You do know QB's not his name, right? Blank expression reassuring him. You should ask him. He's an okay guy too. K, catch you later. Watching himself disappear into nowhere with a smile and a shake of his head. I really am a fool. There you are. Statement prickly and cold, meant to ward off any would-be instructors. Here I am, attitude blazing like the sun, unbided by his defense and mounting a surprise pincer attack against this insinuation. I knew you'd miss me. Hey, get off, you dolt! Not prepared for such a brazen trespass of her sovereignty, the flying embrace launched from on high nearly sent the two of them tumbling down the amphitheater steps. It was a calculated risk, though. Ruby knew without a doubt her other team member would be quick to catch them before they fell. I'm sorry. I promised I would. I won't keep you waiting like that ever again. A promise not made lightly. Weiss appeared uncomfortable with its weight clumped on around her waist. Idiot! Burning flush, threatening to melt that icy shell. Don't say things like that. Never saying what she didn't mean. No excuses for Ruby as she took on all blame herself. Responsibility was the only fair answer to her friends and comrades who unfathomably placed their faith in her. She would never hesitate to do the same. Sorry, I missed your match, you guys. Smile unmolested by Weiss's hand against her face, trying to pry her off. I never doubted you'd win. Being literally underneath a rock the entire time, she had no way of knowing if they had truly emerged victorious, yet she still had no doubt. Ah, thanks, sis. Accepting of this apology and bathing in the unwavering confidence in one fell swoop, Yang integrated into the growing group hug. Gah, no, Yang, not you too. Blake, help, said dark-haired girl, was more than content to watch with a smirk of amusement from the sidelines, but once her presence was noted by Weiss, she became fair target for Yang, who reached out to snag her partner while keeping one overreached arm lashed around the other two. With her months of experience in dwelling with her covert partner, Blake had no issue slipping out of Yang's grasp. Despite the same amount of time dealing with the blonde sister, she could not escape her determination when Ruby simply transported the three of them around her using her semblance. Yang was all too happy to go along with her sister's whim, squeezing her partner in her wide-reaching embrace, which now encompassed the entire team. What in the name of Revenant has gotten into you? Weiss shouted, incapable of caring about the milling crowd turning her heads towards the odd reunion while she struggled to breathe. Nothing, Ruby asserted, squeezing even harder while being squashed in return so that the universe might never tear them apart. It was the truth in a way, admittedly happy, though no more so than she could always be, knowing that she had friends like these on her side. Hopeful, even though she knew that the future would always hold equal parts joy and heartbreak. Fearful, but never more than what was due. These things were forever omnipresent, but presented themselves more than visibly to her in a life that seemed to be getting shorter by the day. The lie was that she was running out of time and wanted to enjoy every moment of this world as it stood. Nothing had changed, and yet everything did. So, changed from the battle gear into more casual dress, and thankful that they had broken from the team Moira long before that. Weiss regarded her compatriots who were reveling in their dorm time. Who are we going to put forth for the single rounds? Not it. A disinterested hand raised behind a nose beard in an orange-bagged book. Yeah, I'ma have to go with Blakey on this one, Yang agreed, flopping back into her bottom bunk and arching her back in an accustomed manner which made her partner's ears twitch. I'm pooped after that last match. Of course, I knew there was no way we'd lose, but I didn't expect those two to put up such a fight. Too quick, no votes left very few options, and Ruby was quick to yield her nomination, having already experienced the spotlight too much for 2 lifetimes. You should do it. Why sighed at the sight of her partner's slackjaw, already sensing what the likely question was to be. I know we've had our our contentions, but I'm not too prideful to admit you're the better fighter, Ruby. No matter who else ends up in the finals, you've already demonstrated you can go toe to toe with Pyra. Let's face it, if you can do it, you can handle anything this tournament throws at you. Honestly surprised by this humility and unprejudiced opinion, Ruby was left stunned but no less hesitant about competing. Memories from the tuning exam stirring paranoia even now, not to mention that she eagerly awaited Naruto's arrival and did not want to miss out being the first to greet him. And what would he see upon that arrival? A selfish and brilliant girl, or a strong and independent woman who could throw down with the best of them? This was the chance to demonstrate how far she had come as an individual, rather than the biased image presented through parasitic eyes. Not that her ego needed this boost, she required no reassurance anymore, from the tip of that cold steel nearly overflowing in her petite grip to the way her body metamorphosed from an unwieldy pubescent to an ethereal muse when pushing the limits of acceleration. She was comfortable with her strengths and her faults, but this wasn't for her. The moment of silence in which she contemplated was for those who weren't quite at the point of contentment yet. Weiss stared at her hopefully, pleading, demandingly, asking her to return a victory. Who was she not to oblige? All right, Ruby agreed with a smile, coaxing something approximate on the face of her partner. I guess it's my turn, huh? Ho ho! Them stiffs won't never know. Killer Bees made it so. Taking this to mean that his cohort had completed his task of distracting their Kumo manders, Naruto didn't bother looking up from the intricate seal array he was studiously applying to a cleared patch of shell. But Bees further cooperation you got to earn. Now it be your turn. Working on it, Naruto mumbled, still intensely focusing on a horned surf under his brush. Well, don't mean to rush, but I'm almost done. While snapping at B wasn't his intention, the teenage Jinchuriki was too nervous to be anything but on edge, and the truth was that he had no idea how close he actually was to finishing because nothing like this seal had ever been attempted. Equal parts research, divination, deep dives into Kurama's memories, notes that he had borrowed from Jiraiya, and good old-fashioned guesswork. The completeness of the construct would forever be in doubt until they went ahead and tried it. The suspense of B mounting, you got about 5 minutes in counting. He would have been upset except that could hear the anxious fingers of the man's 8 swords strapped to his body, meaning that B was every bit as excited and nervous as he was. Well, that was probably a lie, but it was getting closer to the truth, and more time he spent scribbling what looked like a drunken spirograph. Time, though, was running out literally. He had only realized about one pair week ago. In all likelihood, the element had started some time long before that, and they simply hadn't noticed because of its slow progression. At first, it only erased the beginning and ends of each day, monotonous scenes of waking, washing, dressing, eating, resting, events differing so little between them, between each day, neither noticing when these wee hours were skipped like credits to a TV show binge. Only when the whole chunks of the day vanished with a wink did they realize that something was drastically wrong. If Austin's machine didn't exasperate things, it at least made it obvious. The period when Ruby fell under its influence was like a glitch in video to him, skipping, freezing, delaying those precious seconds. Why was unknown, just like everything else about them. What exactly also wasn't quite clear as they struggled to make sense of fraction memories and images scrounged together like two jigsaw puzzles thrown together on the floor with pieces getting lost in the carpet and under the couch. All they knew was that it portended and that it would soon go beyond stealing from them, and the twilight, the haze bookend dawn and dusk. Soon it would take everything. Not if he could help it. Naruto instead finished the last arb- arbustel with an added flourish. Despite it all, he stared back at his masterpiece with a smile which pierced the sweat and grime matted on his skin. He stood cautiously, staving off that creeping blackness framing his vision, and finding himself steadied by a firm but kind hand, nodding to his fellow Jinchuriki, and stepping as if each of the labyrinth lines were tripwire, though they practically were. Naruto pistoned his half-naked body in the center of the spiral. It's all there, from the safety of the margin, the dark-skinned man questioned with a raised eyebrow. Naruto smirked, almost, reopening the shallow wound that had leaked slowly throughout his work. He swiped the freshly blood finger on the rudimentary storage seal resting just over his heart. It's just missing a pair. Ignoring the wince from phantom pain and his unintentional rhyming, Naruto withdrew what lay inside with the same sort of precaution and wariness with which he trod over the magical circle. And anticlimactically emerging from the small puff of smoke, glazed violet marble stared up at him from his palm. Taken aback from the span of a few heartbeats, their clean, waxy appearance looked fake, sitting all by their lonesome, without a face to frame them. Even after he felt the static presence of chakra within, the legendary eyes never stopped looking unreal, like some kind of blown glass trinket instead of the almighty gifts they really were. Throughout, Beast stood silently vanguard, admiringly splitting his attention between the Rinnegan and their surroundings. Kurama, with the real deal in front of him, the illusion on Naruto was lifted, and he suddenly realized the hitch in their plan. What are the chances of the eyes staying back here when we go over? There's no way we can just leave them here unguarded. Contently silent for several hours, now speaking up immediately as any restful notion was banished the moment those eyes were unveiled to the world. Unlikely, gruffness covering up any personal health concerns. If they aren't destroyed by the effort, they will stick with us as any other physical object in the seal. Naruto looked over to B as if the man could understand the weight on the decision he was about to make. Well, what you be waiting for? Time to open the door. Blinking in the face of such irreverence, Naruto found himself stunned with B's recklessness until he found himself laughing at this that laughing until he found himself laughing at this. Naruto realized that B wasn't the type to mash rash decisions. He knew fully well the possible consequences of their sojourn. What he was trying to relate in his own unique way was that despite all the words on to the contrary of duty, professionalism, lack of fraternity between them, B trusted him. Gently cupping those morbid accessories, he appreciated the irony of it all with a snort. Nothing special, just everything. Ready? He asked all who were listening, the forest shrinking back and going mute as it wanted nothing to do with this venture. The thumb ups from B, along with an ear-splitting grin, a distracted grunt like indigestion from within. Himself, was he ready? It was a lot to be betting on this light-year-long shot. Even Uzumaki luck should cash out with these astronomical odds. So much all could go wrong. A galactic size scale weighed the balance with consequences bordering on the unfathomable. Was it worth the risk? No, one existence, no matter how high in esteem it is held, cannot be compared to a universe of life. It was not a fair trade. Forever and unbalanced, disparately of luck, health, happiness, virtue. This was life. Balance was stagnant, unchanging, dead. A ball rolls down a slope. Heat transfers to cold. Air flows into a vacuum. Life moved forward on the gumption of others who upset the status quo. He who dares, pushing a little bit of their combined chakra into the eyes, which suddenly came alive, pulsating with warmth from a celestial body that was threatening to burn a hole in his hand. He was forced to drop them where they rolled with exasperation into a head that wasn't there. The blood black seals being swept up into that pinprick tear into the universe. A little push, a little prick, a tear, a rip in a world as delicate as a balloon, flowing into nothing. No matter how many times I gaze up at the night sky, I always find something new. Regarding the headmaster with a foreign curiosity, Ruby chose to remain silent in her corner, not knowing if the man was talking to her, or even really what she was doing up at such an hour. It was far past when the call of sleep would beckon her, and she was worried. We know so much about how the world works, enough to lift us out of our stone caves and mud hovels into these glistening ivory towers. Gesturing off to the darkened lighthouses, perched high and standing guard over the carefully staked castle. Yet, no matter how high we climb, it seems like we are bound to the mundane and earthly, never to understand the mysteries of the heavens. Fragmented chunks of the moon floated there amidst the sugar-dusted night sky. always more of a metaphor than a question. Long ago, people at least used to speculate about the universe beyond our planet instead of looking at it with fear and suspicion. They tried to understand it. They constructed relationships now long since forgotten about how light travels at unprecedented speeds and vast distances from out in the cosmos just to reach us. Years, centuries, millennia. Looking at each of those stars is like looking at a snapshot in time, records of a bygone era. But I thought you said that each time you saw something new, not the words getting the better of her, but her own curiosity. If it's new, how can it be old? How can we understand something yet still have it remain a mystery? Silence, a chuckle like the twilight twinkling of the stars overhead. That's the question, isn't it? Why did you call me up here? Time had been running out, but now had stopped. It was late, too late, and she was ever so tired. You will find that I don't have all the answers, Ruby. Turning back to his student, his disciple, his agent, his ward, Ruby could see the same weariness in his eyes. And for all that I am sorry, right now, in fact, I hardly have any answers at all. I feel adrift, like light lost amongst those stars, never to find its way again. Uh, Admitting this was a large, bitter pill which he swallowed heavily without any cocoa to soothe the burn. I am sorry that I have to rely on you to place such a heavy burden on your shoulders. You, who knows so little about this wicked history, I believe yet holds the answers whether you realize it or not. Steadfast in her stance, Ruby remained unaffected by this weight, wondering if she had been unknowingly shouldering it all along. Inherently, she already knew that come tomorrow everything would change one way or another. How she knew was perhaps one of those paranormal answers Osmond believed were in her DNA. Whatever happens next, not looking at her or the school anymore, but at the dark clouds pulling around jagged mountain peaks like wads of seaweed drowning the sea of stars. Whatever happens, I hope you can forgive those of us who ruined this world and try to salvage something from what is left. Dark clouds like a funeral pall had been pulled overhead, smothering Vale's skyline and turning those glistening skyscrapers into great tombstones. Unlike a summer storm, which brought a cool relief, this overcast ushered in unseasonable winter, which seemed to chill the bone and prickle nerves. Swaddled in her woolen cloak, Ruby looked up unbidden at the sky, with the slightest smile on her face, despite knowing that something ominous was afoot. Between the crimson cape and the unnamed armament in her hands, she was ready to beat back anything which came her way. This was what she truly believed. Pulling back her cowl with the first raindrops summoned by the heavens, she let the thunder of the crowd wash over her. Salutations! A smile and a wave like a bright red umbrella caught her eyes across the arena. My name is Penny. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Let's have a fun match and maybe we can be friends afterwards. Smile blossomed with nurturing. Ruby accepted this distinctive greeting with a small enjoyment as one tasting a new candy, flavor familiar and identity on the tip of the tongue. Sure, sounds great. Fantastic. What was a gentle pattern became what was a gentle patter became a roar, the crowd a deluge of cheers and shouts rivaling the storm as the timer counted down to zero. Lightning flashed. With all the excitement and passion in her body, Ruby struck away at the unexpected and novel defenses of her opponent. The blunt edge of the kabutowari, batting aside the rapiers of command like marionettes, and simulation and the simultaneous fire from the integrated smoothbore revolver forced the ginger girl to move from her starting position without an expression of surprise. The porcelain-skinned doll moved like a puppet herself, yanking up on those nigh invisible strings to dodge the scatter shots, all the while commanding her contingent of swords in a graceful ballet which leapt around Ruby's frantic breakdance. Falling to her back leg, the copper girl waved her hand across the battleground and swept her blades with this movement. A tsunami of cutting edges headed towards Ruby, who gambled through the inconsequential gaps, making a light of the mincemeat girl before once again charging past the blank-faced girl in a flash of crimson. Striking at that back leg, which had most of her opponent's weight on it, brought a surprise for both girls. Penny, as she found herself dropped to a knee, and Ruby, who felt her hands tingle with a backlash from hitting such a solid object, screeching to a halt and depositing a black streak of rubber on the arena floor, Ruby turned quizzically back to the other seemingly diminutive girl. She had expected resistance, but not to this degree, or a protection would have blunted the strike, reinforced the bones, but still would have not held up so heavily against such momentum. Likewise, Penny had not expected such amount of brute force from the slim human, even with her exceptional speed. With only trivial damage inflicted, though, she was far faster to recover due to her nature. Due to her nature, Ruby was not one too easily distracted by the extraordinary, and was able to gather her wits before the sword gathered their plasma charge and blasted her out of the arena. The gray rays left charged streaks in their wake, which easily covered up Ruby's own skid marks as they tracked her throughout the ring. Ear-splitting grin obscured within that blur of movement, Ruby found herself enjoying every aspect of this battle, despite her earlier protest. Having experienced a similar fighting style, some might have said she had unfair experience. However, her greatest benefit was without a doubt the ability to roll within the punches. Though the general had likely made her aware of all the legends surrounding the girl, Penny would still be woefully unprepared for the reality of the fight. Her logical mind stemmed by the contradictions which consisted Ruby Rose. It was the same, it was difficult. She had faced the puppet master before, she had never faced anyone like this. The epitome in those green eyes were a fecund tide-pool ready to give birth to new ideas with one good spark. A spark Ruby was more than happy to provide, as silver eyes glistened to flint. In Penny she found a fertile field ready to plant new ideas, and someone she would be more than happy to call a friend when all was said and done. In order to till the soil, first she had to break the earth. The fingers of green fire intermeshed in a deadly web that hemmed her in on every side. There was no way out except through the roof or underground, so she did neither, slipping straight through the scalding net like it was nothing more than a projection. But she was the projection, the illusion of a human amidst the faded mannequins. Nothing visible changed with this rose-colored projectile flying at her, not a hair out of place, or a ruffle in her catalogue dress as Penny retracted her weapon to defense. No indication or facial cue either to tell when she suddenly reversed this strategy and went on the attack, lunging at the trailing edge of the beacon student with both hands flinging her swords at ghastly images. Like the rain, they pelted the floor all around, and just like the heavens, they couldn't seem to touch her, bobbing and weaving in and out of the automatic loom, trying to hem her in. She realized that the blades weren't trying to hit her, but rather herd her into a corner where the sturdy girl could deal with her in close quarters. Getting bored of the stalemate they otherwise seemed to be in, Ruby decided she would allow herself to be led and see where it went. After all, she didn't have anything to lose. Sure enough, briefly touching down on the balls of her feet was enough of a pause to realize that there was a blade already waiting for her, preventing her from dodging further to the right. Hearing the displaced air akin to the flight of a shuriken told her that she wouldn't be able to move left knee either. Toying with the idea of escaping anyway, she was prompted in this thought by a rapid-fire onslaught of blades descending on her. Once again, using the kabutowari purely for defense, she knocked the projectiles away one by one after the other, with tight motions like paddling a kayak. Counting down in her head when the last sword flew at her, she parried on her forward foot and batted this one straight back at Penny, who, for the first time since the match, started show anything other than detached focus on her unblemished face. Crossing her arms, Penny intercepted her own weapon without a flinch, even as it sawed through her linen sleeves. Not drawing them, as Ruby planted a worn-out boot in the same place, forcing the other girl back only a half step. Confusing disregarded, the crimson-hooded girl continued her assault, dispelling the notion that she was purely a long-range fighter, though it appeared Penny aimed to do the same, quickly recalling two of her blades, which slipped perfectly into her petite grip like a molded skit. She attacked back with mechanical ferocity. Heavy blows caused the orange sparks to flee from the two with every blow, the same color orange as the streaks which appeared to glow on either side of the dull weapon. Four more rapiers joined in the assault against her, held aloft by invisible hands even as Penny hammered away at her defenses with the same unpredictable strength. For the crowd, it was the only thing they could see from their vantage on high. the arena darkened by hair and drowned sun fireflicks, ducked it out in blackness, bathed in white noise where not even the announcers would make heads or tails. For Ruby, it was religious experience. More than that, because it was actually happening. She was losing. If she was if she was as strong as her sister, she might have done some damage. If she was as cunning as Blake, she might have thought of a winning strategy. If she was is disciplined as Weiss, she wouldn't be having so much fun that she could ignore all that and just swim through the battle, a shooting star through space. Penny was both strong and fast, and also seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense her even in these trying conditions, where Ruby's hearing was dulled by the pelting rain like snare drums. Her silver eyes squinted and blurred, and her footing barely holding steady with the cleats of aura she projected downward. Penny was unaffected by it all, where was here was someone her age who outclassed her in every aspect, despite the advantage she should have held. She was frustrated, she was furious, she was elated. Here was someone in her world who surpassed her, someone she could compare herself with on an even level. No healing ability, no legendary heritage, no demon bequeathing OP abilities to skew the measure. Someone she could aspire to surpass, even being knocked back by 3 consecutive blows and flying weightlessly through the liquefied air. She had a smile on her face, landing unsteadily on her feet and quickly dropping to all fours, soaping wet, the hair veiling her face contorted with manic joy and ragged breath, summoning up strength from the same bottomless pool she imagined resided in all of them. She leaned on the kabutowari and pushed herself up through the atmosphere, crashing down on top. Once her feet, she allowed on deep breath to collect herself, to collect everything that she let loose on and to inhale those living details of every surface, and then another breath to take a step forward, another to counter the 2 glowing blades brought to cut her down, another to push against their overbearing strength and drive their brethren back, one more to strike a blow of her own, crashing against an iron barricade reinforced solely against her. With every breath she became stronger, with every strike she felt more alive. As all those other things faded away into the amorphous backdrop, and there was left nothing but her and her opponent. Even the cautious anticipation of Naruto's arrival became but a passing thought against the present moment. More than visceral, more than real, it was the only truth which existed in her one-track mind as it blissed out on that deadly intimacy. At least, it was until unreality came knocking once again. Abruptly, everything stopped with the blink of something like lightning, only soundlessly and without any actual light. The 2 combatants stood stock with spread out equidistance from one another in the center of the ring. Orange mane of hair matted her face, which shed water like glass. Penny blinked and forced an expression of surprise at the intrusion to their sanctioned match. Across from her and the black-clothed figure in between them, Ruby formed a much more believable face of shock. The trance-like stare sloughed of owl state, slagged off as easily as the rain ran down her now soaked cape. "Excuse me, who are you?" Cocking her head, Penny tried to work through the logical inconsistencies to this turn of events. No matter how outlandish, there was only one possibility within the mind of the dreamer as she squinted at the wishfully familiar silhouette. Except Naruto, spiky hair she knew turned in her direction, and she was treated with a mask in his favorite color staring at her with a single eye hole. "You're not Naruto," the figure giggled, a disturbing and high-pitched sound that went unhindered by the downpour. Whatever wavering doubt had been in her assumption was promptly cast aside as easily as her cloak, which weighed her down and covered up the menacing presence of the Kabutowaри by her side. "Nope," it chirped. "Don't worry. Toby's a good boy." End of chapter 34.